guys, how's it going tonight? I'm Vulture Culture, and in tonight's live stream, we're going to answer the question, is the Korg MS-20 the best synthesizer you can get for making Darkwave? A la Sisters of Mercy, Bauhaus, Siouxsie and the Banshees, all of the modern bands too, of course, like Molchad Domo, I think is how you say that band's name. She Wants Revenge, all sorts of stuff. And I think this is a great synthesizer because nothing meets that dark, gloomy, cold aesthetic like this synthesizer. And I'm lucky enough to have a vintage Rev 2 MS-20 from somewhere in the early 80s. But I think the Korg reissue for $700 or so is incredible. You can get one of these bad boys. This synthesizer has held its value better than any other synthesizer I have. This thing goes for about $1,600. That's the cheapest price I could find right now on Reverb today. So if you can find one for somewhere around that price point, or maybe even a little lower, that's probably a good deal. Another way you could get this sound is to use the Korg Legacy Collection, or just buy the VST of the MS-20 from Korg, and that's $100. So there's a few different ways you can get into this. You could do the $100 Korg version. I believe there's a Behringer knockoff. You could get that. You could get the Korg real thing, which is like a mini size, which is even better because it'll integrate to Eurorack better than this version. So I really love this synthesizer. And this synth is the original, came out in 1978, Monty, but this synthesizer being a Rev 2 is one of the later ones, probably 1982. So yes, Cherry Audio also puts one out. I think that one's like about $30. Although the Korg is Korgier, Sean said that. That's awesome. William Orbit used MS-20 for the 90s Madonna sound. Yeah, so this thing's been used everywhere. Of course, probably most famously by Daft Punk. Really cool synthesizer. And so we're going to start with just playing around with this and coming up with what I think is probably the most important patch you can make for this synth, which is a bass patch. So I'm going to turn the effects off. And so we just have... And I'm going to bring the volume up a bit. Now, to make a bass patch, if you're not familiar with the synthesizer, we've got two voltage-controlled oscillators, which is awesome because they're going to be really thick and go in and out of tune, especially in the low register on this particular synthesizer. Really sweet. Yeah, just unapologetic nasty is a great way to describe the synthesizer. So I'm going to turn VCO2 off, so we have the mixer in this section. And so I'm starting with the sawtooth wave. You'll notice I have a little bit of vibrato in there. We could take that off for the bass. Turn the portamento off. But I'm going to add some release because when you think about how like an 80s goth bassist would be playing the bass, it's going to be like dun 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 dun, right? We also need to drop the octave, so right, and you can hear it's going out of tune a little bit. Oh, so juicy, so groovy. Then we have this incredible Korg filter. The power on this thing is crazy. Really juicy. Actually, a lot more tame than a lot of people might think. Let's crank it all the way up. We're a little past 8, right? It's not as brutal as everybody seems to think. It's not until we get into some of the patching that we'll get some of that action. But we can do some really cool filter tricks and so on and so forth. So to create this bassline sound, I'm using the envelope generator 2 here to be able to give us that sound. I might use a little hold, no attack time, right? Because we don't want it to fade in at all. That's not how a pluck instrument sounds. And by increasing that, we can get a really authentic sounding, really cool. Really just thick. Getting that hold and release time right for this is super important to give it that sound. Now, if I crank it up, I'm at right about at 9. If I take it further than that, then it starts to sound like a, you know, synth bass sort of thing. So 9 is probably good. That sort of a thing. Yeah, we could definitely go how fast the LFO goes. So we can control that with this modulation generator. And we have different shapes that we could do with it, but the modulation generator can go pretty far. Cuban Heels Beer Belly, welcome to the stream. Sounds very dated. Well, it is from 1978, of course. That is going to be kind of the nature. What do you think sounds not dated, though? That would be what I'd be more interested in. So anyways, we're going to turn the LFO off, though. We could add a little bit of vibrato in if we wanted to, but I don't think that would be necessary. So, oh, and turn the peak off, because otherwise we're kind of in acid territory. What is it? Something like that to get that sort of Sisters of Mercy sort of sound. If we wanted to make it brighter, increase the cutoff frequency, add a little bit of peak, get a little bit of resonance in there. Dubstation Zero, how's it going? Can we get some scum cheers in the chat for Dubstation? And then bring just the amount the envelope generator is involved down. In this case, I think it actually sounded better. Something in that neighborhood. So I'm going to jump over to the DAW over here, and I'm going to delete everything that we had. So this is what I had before, and I'm also going to change the time signature to 129. So that's going to take us into that kind of Lucretia, My Reflection territory, which is kind of what I'm going for here. If you don't know the song by Sisters of Mercy, one of the most iconic Sisters of Mercy songs that were done. And you can see I've got a couple of things set up here, but for now, I'm going to just delete everything, remove extra tracks. I'm going to turn my effects off here. So what we have is just this very simple setup. And so we're going to just record in maybe something super simple. Perhaps I could do it to drums, but I think I'll just go with a metronome real quick. So let's see how well I can play. there we go. That was good enough for now. I'm sure I could have played potentially better, but you know, it's we're having fun on the internet, right? Everybody loves fun. Jumping back over to the DAW, let's go ahead and program in a little drum beat. So I'm gonna just load this up and pull open Satala here, and we'll be able to drop something in. Now the drums I'm using are from my vintage industrial drum sample pack, Diodes and Rust. And the link to that is in the description. $10, easy to get, super fun. I try to make my products as easy and as available to people as possible. So I'm going to just drop in a kind of 4 to the floor action here. Zoom in a little bit further. Let's see if this is the right tempo. If I'm doing this right, I feel like I might not be. There we go. And I'm going to bring this down actually, so it's just 1 real quick. Do you have to be on desktop to subscribe? Absolutely not. Shouldn't have to at all. Should be right there. You could support the channel if you want, and I appreciate it greatly. So what we'll do is see if we prefer it with or without the kick. And yes, I am using Reaper as my DAW. Let's drop a crash in. Good old crash. One thing I noticed from checking out a bunch of Darkwave bands ahead of time was, so for one thing, I want to say that a lot of Darkwave bands don't use a lot of synths. They'll actually kind of focus. Most of what you're hearing is the drum machine is very cold, and you know, that's what's giving it that electronic sound. But a lot of times it's done with a bass guitar with some like chorus and a regular guitar without too much distortion, kind of like the twangy clean guitar sound, and then you know, some vocal, and maybe like one synthesizer on top of that when we're talking vintage Darkwave. And so for that reason, we're going to be kind of emulating a band in this live stream with a synthesizer, as opposed to making synth sounds. It's going to be synthy because this is an analog mono synth, right? So it's going to have that character. So it's a thing to try, or, you know, to a different way to approach making music than we have done in a lot of other streams. So anyways, let's what I was going to say is, I've noticed this like 8th note pattern is so common with Darkwave music. So we're going to just drop in some 8th notes, and we'll just do this type of thing. And that last note, we're going to make an open hi-hat and see how this sounds. One thing I'm going to do is make sure I preserve PDC delayed monitoring and recorded items. What that means is that the because I'm recording this in time, I want it to sound that way. So you could hear that I was rushing a bit there, which I have a tendency to be a rusher. Are you a rusher or a dragger? You know the reference. Let's see if we have something better here. Dubstation says, just got home from NobCon and massive wildfires all around. The airport file is about 10 miles away, so Smokey had to take my toddler somewhere with better air quality. Spotty dish internet. That's horrifying, dude. I am very sorry. I'd love to know how NobCon was. However, I'm mostly concerned about you and your family and the safety of everybody that you love. So I hope everything's okay. I hope your lungs are breathing good air, because we need you to live. You must be protected at all costs, and your family must be protected at all costs. So I hope you're well. Stay safe. I echo that, Sean. All right, I like that second time. That's pretty common, that like once you sit into the groove. So I'm going to just keep this one loop going for this track. That will be sufficient. So one thing we can do is we can actually drop this into a side chain. And I've set this up before the stream, but I wanted to show you a different way of doing it. Last week, or maybe the week before, I showed how to do sidechain compression with a plugin called Duck that I like a lot. However, you could also do it simply with the Reacomp or your stock compressor. I'm using Reaper, so it's going to be Reacomp in this DAW, but you could do it with whatever. And this is the stock compressor in Reaper. And what I've done is I've just routed, instead of compressing the main inputs, I'm compressing the auxiliary inputs. So that's going to be the kick and the snare. And in fact, if we solo that, you can hear what this sounds like if I go to preview filter. So I'm going to... And you'll notice it sounds a little weird, and that's because I've low passed and high passed the sound of the kick and the snare, which is being routed in. And that's just to focus that sound a little bit more, because sometimes a kick drum, I don't think in this case, but sometimes a kick drum will sort of ring out, or a snare drum will have some reverb built into it. So in this case, I want to just narrow that. So that's a big tip when it comes to sidechain compression, is to actually remove some of the lows and highs from your signal content. Depending on what content you have, what you're trying to do with it, you might want to emphasize those frequencies or something like that. You might want to leave it wide open. That might work best. But in this case, I narrowed it. Quick attack and release. Auto release is on. Ratio of 4:1. Knee size 12. Really nothing crazy there. And just this will cause it now to pump. It's also very subtle. I think I'm only pulling out 6 decibels. So that's a great way to sort of get some of that sound going. Now I want to focus on the actual sound of this incredible bass I've come up with. And so again, we're going to use Filterverse, which is one of my favorite plugins to use right now. And so we need to create some vintage guitar pedals. Now I happen to have really the perfect combo for this laying over here, but I thought I would do it in plugin form today to sort of illustrate what's going on. So I have a CE3 or CE2 Boss chorus pedal, and then a Boss DM2 or DM3. These are both analog stomp boxes from the 80s that are really great ways. I mean, throw this on a synthesizer and it's going to sound vintage. And a lot of those bands back then, they had something similar to this. They had just a couple of pedals and an amp. And so we're going to go through a few different ways that we could get different types of sounds. By the way, if you're enjoying this stream, hit that subscribe button, like the goddamn video, and can I get some scum cheers in the chat for all the motherfuckers who make every Wednesday night here on YouTube the place to be. Cheers. Monty, I do not think Filterverse sounds the same, and I hope to convince you that by the end of this stream. So we're going to have that loop going, or I could play in stuff, I suppose. And I'm going to turn the hold time down on the synthesizer just so that it doesn't cut out my voice as much. Right? So the first thing we need to do is create a chorus. So how are we going to do that? We're actually going to do it using the flange, which is a weird thing. You might not think of it as being a chorus, but a flanger basically is the same thing as chorus, just with more resonance. So with the resonance all the way down, right, what we're going to get is something that works quite a lot like a chorus. If I load a sequencer, that's going to basically be your sine wave, which is perfect. The way that Boss C3 chorus pedal works is it takes a VCO and it applies phase shift to that, or actually technically it's not, it causes phase shift because it's a delay. So it uses the same bucket brigade delay chips that would be used for an actual delay, but it just uses them in a very short time, and that gives you that chorus sound. So what I'm going to do is just modulate the synthesizer, this cutoff here. It's basically just like thinking of like a filter, right? You could hear that it was currently tracking the time, so I'm going to just turn that off because a vintage chorus wouldn't be tracking the time. And that sounds really good. But the trick or the amazing thing, my favorite feature they've implemented into Filterverse is actually that by hitting this button, now it's when it goes positive in one channel, aka your left headphone, it goes negative in your right. And that's exactly how a vintage chorus works. On that vintage stereo chorus, as the left channel goes positive in time, the left channel goes negative and vice versa. So here we go. So if you're listening in stereo, you'll hear a huge difference between that and if I go back to the mono. Dead down the center if I go to stereo. If we want to give it some more, we can add some resonance. Just a little bit helps. Let's check out cross feedback. It seems to make it less stereo, so that's interesting, but it does smooth it out a bit. I think just a small amount of resonance sounds really great. So we've now created a chorus pedal. What would we have next in our chain, right? And what I would think it might be is a guitar amp. Now there's a bunch of different filters, obviously. Some of them feature different types of sounds. But let's just focus on the filters real quick. So we actually have drive in these filters, and it can sound really good. So what we've got here is pretty good amount of drive versus adds a lot of beef into the sound. Let's keep going. The bread and butter. This is more of your Moog type sound. To get that even further, we could drive the input. So what I'm going to do is drive the input pretty hard and then just pull that same amount out of the output. Something like this. So now we can really hear the difference of the filter, what the drive is doing. Back to Swiss Army knife. Much deeper sort of distortion. Bread and butter, more mid-rangey. And then deep cutter. You can hear that that has even more distortion. So I want to use deep cutter actually, because I think that sounds really good. Push the level as much as we can. And then we will... Another thing to think about when emulating a sound like a bass guitar through a guitar amp is the speaker actually muffles out a little bit of the high end. So I'm going to bring the cutoff down a bit. Oh, it's interesting. There's so much distortion now that it's sort of muffling out the sound. So I'm going to bring some of that out. We could actually turn the flanger off, just listen to this, and reorder which way the signal flow is going. So actually using about 50% drive. Then we could turn the flanger on. Now to finish it off, we need that vintage Bucket Brigade delay. So I'm going to drop in Tempo Lay. Great. I want to call it a plugin because it's almost like Filterverse is a bunch of plugins, right? And they keep adding more. Super excited to see what they come up with next. So just an eighth note delay is perfect. Increase the feedback. If we want to make this more stereo, again, we can just modulate. We could do it a couple of different ways. We could, what would be the best way to do this, actually? When I think about it, there's probably an easier way to do this. I think we can modulate the divisions here. Cross feedback. Oh, I know an even better way to do it. Let's go to Tempong. This is the new version. There we are. Silly me. Now it'll go left and right, but it's basically the same idea. And so now we can have some nice delay in the sound. We probably don't need quite as much feedback, but we can increase the depth a bit to 30%. That's a pretty good amount. And now let's listen to that with the drums. Immediately, I think it sounds a little too dark, right? So we need to, I think what's interesting is that the deep cutter's adding some of those frequencies in. So let's go to bread and butter. That was more mid-rangey, remember? As you crank the resonance on a Moog filter ladder, you start to lose low end. So I can also, this 4.4K frequency kind of reminds me of like the little sizzles you get on a guitar amp. So, yeah, it's definitely a little bit out of time there. So I guess we could play it again. God forbid I actually play something in time. So I'm going to just give myself a little loop here, and we will take it out of the sidechain just so I can hear it. Fine. It's a really great bassline sound, and we can try recording again, maybe a little better this time. Let's try the right notes this time. No, I'm not recording MIDI. I'm not some sort of punk-ass bitch. I'm going to play it badly and not quantize it. There we go. Frederick Chopin, welcome. How's it going? You still kicking ass and taking names, snorting whiskey and drinking cocaine. Cheers, bro. No, I absolutely record MIDI sometimes, but I like playing things live. I feel like it gives it a little bit of a vibe that you don't always get. So that's what I did today, and now we have that in the DAW, and I think this will sound a little bit better. There's nothing wrong with quantizing. That is the wrong screen. Let's jump over here. But we're going to not do that. And dropping in the sidechain will hopefully fool the ear enough that I played it in time. Much better. Much better. So now what we could do is we can move on to another sort of sound, right? So that was our baseline sound. I'm going to call this bass. Easy. Sorry, that was so brutal. What we should do now is make something similar to that, but we're going to use try to create like more of a guitar style sound. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn the effects back off. Now, when I think of a guitar type sound, we have a couple of things to think about. One thing I think about is pulse waves. So pianos and guitars, pulse waves are going to take us more into that territory. And another thing is we're going to have to brighten the synth up a bit because right now it's very dark. So it's actually a very nice bass sound too. Probably would have been better. The other one's so dark. But you know, it is what it is. Let's see how it sounds with that, the effects on. Yeah, too much. So I'm actually happy that we stuck with this. Now let's go over to the oscillators and go to a pulse wave. And we can do it with actually VCO2. You know how that kind of, that pulse sound has a little bit of that in there. Almost like a Stratocaster, right? We need to bring the decay down further though. Because, you know, that's how a guitar is, a really plinky sort of instrument. Now, one thing we could do is if we wanted to play like, play some chord type stuff, we could detune this oscillator up a fifth. So now we're playing a fifth note. Doesn't that have like a really Stratocaster-y type sound? Right? So we could use that to create some of that sort of that sound. So let's jump back over the DAW and just loop a little and see what we could do with this thing. So I've got something of a riff going. The first thing I want to do is take envelope generator's output here. Let me see where that's going. Envelope generator 1 output, and I want to run that in to the amplifier. I think that'll do it. Get fucking in there. No, don't get fucking... Don't get fucky with me. You hear a little of that noise. I need to clean these out again, I think. Okay, so what I've done is by routing that in, the joys of vintage synthesis, right? I've now defeated envelope generator 2 affecting the amplifier. And now I'm using envelope generator 1, which is over here. Which you can hear it's doing something... So what I'm doing now is I can control the release time separately. There's no decay and everything, but I could... I think I'm doing that right. Do I need to increase something somewhere to make that work? What I'm trying to do is keep it from being too fat. I might be, what am I looking for? Envelope generator 1, control input. Just try a different fucking cable, see if that's what it is. Or if I'm doing something wrong. Any MS-20 friends? I need to clean it out with some contact cleaner. Well, that will be good enough for now anyways. That will be able to give us the sound we're looking for. So let's go ahead and try to play that in maybe. I'm going to create a nice extra long loop here in the DAW and play some riffs. Try to play some shit in time for a change. Bauhaus. Let me try this. Let's give just a little of that action in there. My tech always said that these don't get used as often as they should, so. Well, I might have to just try that another day. So, let's go ahead and try this out. Pass was good. There we go. So what we could do is create that into a little loop. And now what we could do is we turn the effects back on. We can see how these effects sound with this synth. So now it's really getting guitarish. So let's jump over to Filterverse and we will turn off the bass and the drums real quick, and we'll just loop this little thing. And what we'll do is see what we have going on. So let's turn off, we'll start with just the bread and butter. So this kind of, the resonance here kind of works as our brightness filter. And a little bright's good, but too much isn't going to sound very 80s, right? Let's make the judgment call out of solo. I actually do like it with more of that high end in there because it does kind of give it that tinny sort of sound. We could change the cutoff a bit. But I think somewhere above 4K avoids those annoying frequencies and instead sounds like a little bit of the high end boost. Let's kick the flanger on. If that's not the most like 80s chorus guitar sound. If we crank the resonance, it starts to get real. Which I don't think we need. And then the tempong. Nice, Sam. We'll actually do some spring reverb stuff too, I think would be fun. But for this case, right now it sounds really good just like this. We'll just duplicate this track here, and I'll delete this. And now we have ourselves a little guitar track. Let's see how it sounds in the sidechain, see if that helps it at all. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. One thing I'm going to do to just help this guitar part out a bit is I'm going to use a compressor and I'm just going to compress it. Attack time 3 milliseconds, auto release, everything should be pretty good. 4:1 knee size, 4:1 ratio, knee size of 12. getting about 6 decibels of gain reduction here, so I'm just adding 6 back in, and then running that through Filterverse will help it be a little bit tighter. I'm happy with that. Let's turn the effects off, and now we're going to jump back over to the synthesizer. And we'll bring the pitch down. And now we're going to create a string sound. So to get that sort of string machine sound that was used by Joy Division, they used an ARP Omni to get that sort of sound. We can get there not too difficult with a little attack. It's sounding a little Blade Runner right now, so we just need to increase the low pass filter. We can spread them apart, so the lowest oscillator can go down to 32 feet. The second oscillator can only go to 16. But I don't know if that's actually going to give us that sound as much. So what I want to do is bring the sustain up a bit too. We could try the ring modulator as well. That's going to have a much brasher sort of sound, which is probably too extreme for, you know, love will tear you apart sort of things. Kind of a cool sound. We could also try the square oscillator. Kind of taking it a little bit more into that Vox Humana sound, right? Another trick is that increasing the peak a bit. And giving it a little throatiness. Let's see if I can do keyboard CV out into the voltage controlled filter. Actually, the best way to do that would be to use the CV out. So that's what note is being played into the external signal processor. We're going to take the, what is that? The CV out here. And we're going to route that bad boy into the filter cutoff frequency. I have one of my gray hairs there. That's great. That's just a reminder of my mortality. And then as we increase the signal level, I'm going to definitely have to give this whole synth a cleaning again. It's crazy how quickly it got corroded. Maybe I need to run it into total. This is great. You're right, Monty. I think it is time to get this thing. I mean, I don't think I need to service it. It's not, the synth itself is in great shape. It's been recently serviced. I just got to clean all this stuff again. It's crazy it got corroded that fast, though. Well, we can accomplish this a few different ways then. is pick out those harmonics that hang around the vowely ah type of ah. Get that sort of vowely thing going on in there. And then what we could do is we could add some frequency modulation. We need very little, just a bit to give it a little of that warbly. We can also use the high pass filter now. We can really thin it out if we want. So let's go ahead and play around with that for a bit. Let's see what we could do with this sort of vibe. This is a cool little thing using the triangle wave, so a little bit of a Legend of Zelda type sound there. And then bringing in VCO2 an octave up with a sawtooth. Kind of a anemic saw sort of sound, and then together. You know, flute adjacent. That sort of vibe, that portamento feel, like Dorian's saying. Yeah, it is a little bit of a Doctor Who sound. It is almost that theremin-y. And it's almost that sort of, thanks, Mom. It's almost that sort of, got a little bit of grit to it, you can hear. We could try emphasizing that a bit with the filters here. I'm able to get more of that vocal tone actually using the high pass filter peak to give it that sort of sound. So what I'm doing there is really kind of using the resonance as a way to sort of get an EQ shape into the sound. So this is where you can really get some really interesting stuff. And I am using... really a pretty aggressive talking filter sound using a combination of the envelopes on both of the filters. Really beautiful sound, and I love anytime we can make a sound that uses a shitload of resonance too. So it's just, I have it on 6 and 7. Let's just dial it all the way up. You can hear how you could get that punky type thing. We're actually sort of getting almost like guitar amp feedback. Yeah, it's just really beautiful there. So why don't we, again, try our best to play some music okay-ish. So I'm going to go ahead and try to record a little bit of some stuff in here. We're going to call this just lead. That's not how you spell lead. There we go. Let's record in some music. It's really taking on a sort of screaming cat sort of tone, for sure. Meow, 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 meow. This area here was where I kind of had it best. I best had it under control sort of on that third take there. So let's see how that sounds all together. I just like to highlight that has no distortion added to it. That's just how the synth sounds on its own. So now what we could do is we can turn Filterverse back on. Here we've really got an aggressive sort of sound here. But what I want to do is let's turn off a couple of things. Just focus on the sound in here. Let's jump over to Filterverse. And we will, if I loop this properly, there we go. And what we could do is turn off the flancher and the tempong and sort of play with the resonance and everything and get it close there. And then check the drive and see what we prefer. It's a very annoying sound, but it sounds good in the mix. Oh, it sounds much better with the deep cutter. So the deep cutter has like this almost guitar amp like velvety sort of sound to it. So that's like that's a shrill ripping sound. We could try pushing more drive into it. I think it's almost too like Boss DS1 guitar pedal sound, like a little. I think it sounds better in this Daft Punky range. Versus the distortion like really ripping. Let's kick the flanger on and see if we like that. So for me, that's just like too much. So we got to dial the wet dry knob down. How's it going, Mighty Pinto? So somewhere around 40% sounds good for this particular cat sound. Let's add some delay. I don't know how this Darkwave song ended up being a cat ballad, but I'm very happy about it. Can I get some scum lemons in the chat? And then, let me see here. Let me open all these guys up so I can unmute them. And see what we have so far. Another way we could kind of play around with this is by sequencing it out. So here we can kind of mix in the bass. This is a good idea to do anytime you're mixing a track. One thing I like to do is have each individual element come in separately. Now, not necessarily for the arrangement, but just so I can hear how every sound affects the vibe. What I'm feeling with that is I wouldn't mind adding an EQ to that bass line just to bring forward like 500 or so. And a little bit of 2K. There's almost no 2K in that sound, so that's the high end of that bass line. So let's try that again. Another little silly thing that's bothering me is the snare drum, the gating on the snare drum, which is from the actual R53 that it's sampled from, has like an automatic gate function. It's a little too short for this drum sound, so I'm going to pick a non-gated drum sound. snare better? Okay, so mixing trick here. I've got the phase of the kick and the snare here. And if you hear it now, you'll notice that the snare has sort of a hollow sound. I've tuned the snare up 400 cents or so, which I think sounds really good. But when I hit the phase on, you'll hear by flipping the phase, you'll hear the bass get louder. That's correct. Whenever you're checking phase, if you're hearing phase canceling, it will come across as there being bass missing, the fundamental of the snare missing. So in this case, the kick and the snare are canceling each other out at this tuning. And so we need to flip the phase on the snare or the kick drum. Doesn't really matter. Now I'm not 100% sure if that was actually happening, but it, for the moment, sounded like that. So yeah. So Tom, I've actually done that for you inside of Diodes and Rust. So if I load inside of Diodes and Rust, we have in the percussion section, we have, or maybe it's in the cymbal section. Yeah, we have tambourines. So we can load this in. And you can hear that's like a already down-tuned tambourine. But some of them get really nasty, like those metal hit sounds that you're talking about. And then Pinto, I haven't had a chance yet. I've actually been in Sarasota. I got home today at about 5 p.m., tried to set up everything for the stream as quickly as possible. But I definitely want to check it out. I appreciate you sending some music my way. But we have all of these awesome, really gritty industrial tambourine sounds in there. But that's for probably going to be on the best synth for making industrial stream. Might as well bring this forward. Let's take out a little bit of some annoying frequency in here. I don't know what it is. Or not even annoying. I just want to push the sound further back in the mix, but keep some of that there. Just by pulling out some of that 2K, you know. Looking at the tempong on the guitar, let's try putting it into dotted notes. The distortion from the deep cutter sounds really great here. Again, I'm just going to pull out some sort of frequency. I think it's probably going to be even higher. Yes. And so Twin City said earlier, what about making some sort of really cool deep drone type thing? So I think that is a very logical next step here. So again, I'm going to just turn the effects off, change this to MS-20, and go record some more. So let's jump back over here. A little too bright, do you think? Okay, we could bring just a little bit more of the high end out here. I could increase the low end a bit and then bring down the volume. So let's make some sort of drone. So funny that creating a cat sound was not on the agenda for today, but I'm happy I did it. So let's go way down low. Let's use sawtooth waves, right? This is probably pretty standard stuff. And actually what I want to do is create sort of like a bandpass sound. So what we could do is set the cutoff to the same frequency. And then increase the amount here. I don't really know the syntax or the AR for building drum loops to start with. I'm not really sure what you mean by AR. Love Pink Floyd, echoes, keys, tines, periscope, submarine sounding lead. It's dangerously close to a whale sound, which we need to have more of. Yeah, it's true. I definitely need to make more cat sounds. So. Yeah, I really don't know either of those modern, more groove station type stuff. That's outside of my usual range. Sorry to Karmic. Really great sort of sound here. Maybe a little less attack. I have a feeling that once we have everything going here, it might be just too much, right? But we'll see. Maybe no attack, Tam, and just release. Really great throaty sorts of sounds. So yeah, peacock sounds like eerie 200-pound cats. I don't really know peacocks made sounds. I saw a peacock yesterday at the Moat Aquarium, and they have a like a bird sanctuary where they rehab birds, and they had a peacock in there. Love a fucking peacock. Almost as good as a vulture. little bit much with the talking. With that sound, just a great way to sort of accentuate that bass line, sort of build that in. You can mod it for sure. Yeah, MS-20 and WaveStation, talk about like two different flavors of Korg that are just so iconic. But yes, you can mod it, and at some point I probably will have to. Max, how's it going, by the way? So let's go ahead and check this out with some effects now. Just filthy, but we probably don't need to go that crazy with it. I think that it's actually probably like its own awesomeness is probably sufficient. Very awesome. So let's hear that with everything now. Actually building up into quite a nice track. So we need another layer. So we're just going to duplicate this, pull the, we're going to call that the growl, leave that in there, delete this, and again, turn the effects off, turn the MS-20 on. What I was dreaming up as I was hearing that, could do a few sound effects for sure. We could do a, you know, like a falling noise sound if we wanted to. So why don't we jump over to the synth here and go ahead and do that. Just turn this first VCO off. Increase the release really far, right? So this is going to be very simple. like a whoosh sound. You can quantize audio in Reaper. I'm choosing not to. That's literally it. If we go back to the DAW, we can see that we've created a nice swoosh. And in this case, we could probably use Filterverse in a couple more creative ways than what I've done before. So I'm going to just delete this. We'll call this swoosh. I appreciate it very much, Monty. So the swoosh sound here, what we're going to do is just open up Filterverse. And this time, I'm going to turn the deep cutter off. I'm going to turn the flange off and just focus on the delay here. It seems like I was a little late there, surprisingly. Oh, I dragged it wrong, that's why. And we just need like a longer delay time and probably less feedback too. And we could even run it through some reverb too. So we've covered this before, so I know I'm going to kind of do this a little bit fast. In the case of space, I'm going to unmodulate this, bring the attack and release up, and make it kind of wet. I mean, that's basically how you make a Vengeance style big whoosh sound, which is great for transitions. And if you... is the sound dropping? No, it should be still good. Should still... I see it echoing on my end. Hopefully everything is okay. But do you have to pay Nike for that? I don't know what that means. But Ed from Earth, thank you for becoming a member of this channel. Really appreciate it. Can I get... I'm going to get myself a little... I think I need to find the fucking path. Can I get a scum cheers out there for Ed from Earth for re-upping that membership? Appreciate it very much, my friend. Filthy Scum, true and true for a long time now. Ed, thank you so much for supporting the channel directly. Can I get some cheers, guys? Hell yeah. Thank you, Hypothesis. So we got a swoosh. I want to get like some sort of square lead in here. I love what you do, Ed, and I can't wait to meet you one day. Danny DR, greetings from the Netherlands. How's it going? Welcome to the stream. It's pretty late over there, so I appreciate you being up. So we're going to jump back over to the synthesizer here and probably make, I'm thinking, one more sound. Way too much release. Okay, so let's jump back over to the square wave. We have our pulse width here, right? I'm going to just open everything up and turn everything off, kind of get it back to like a standard type of sound. Right? And let's go ahead and bring in oscillator 2 on a square wave as well. And one of the reasons I picked the MS-22, guys, is because a synthesizer like the Mini Moog was used a lot by bands in this era, and you can get that really raw analog tone that people love from the Mini Moog with the MS-20. You just can't get it from every synthesizer, but the MS-20 has it in spades. Ring modulation, when you were doing SY99 demos, did you show the sample to operator frequency modulation capabilities? I didn't, Max, because I'm not the best with the SY99. I haven't had the time to really sink in on that. So 4:34 a.m. here, but it's always time for an MS-20. Well, thank you for hanging out with us, Danny. So welcome to the stream. Yes. Now, one thing I'm going to to do is actually jump back over here and open up Filterverse. And this is going to be a completely different type of sound than what we've done before. So I'm going to just initialize the plugin, which you could do just by hitting that little init button there. What I need desperately is some coils. So coils is a really cool spring reverby type thing. And where, oh, let's turn that off. So you can already hear like how crazy this is. And like how many layers of comb filters we have going on here. Craziness. Let's go back to -4 and dampen it. That's getting closer to like a real spring reverb type sound. Seems like these positive integers are more reverby. Like almost some really like a dark cave type sound, and then negative. I haven't read the manual on this part, which I apologize to Polyverse for not being super up on it, but I'm just going off my ears here, and I'm getting more springiness down in this direction. So, going to the routing, I drag this around and look at the routing again. So I haven't really figured out always what I want to do with the routing, but what I've found is there's some pretty cool tricks you can do by dragging these around. So in this case, what I want to do is just use the Swiss Army knife and use it as a high-pass filter, turn it on. Going into the Swiss Army knife, let's add some tempong as well. So what I'm kind of going for here, I'd love to get some vocals in here, but I'd have to do a little bit of work to set up a microphone and everything. I don't know if this is getting into eerie peacock territory, but I definitely need some eerie peacock synth sounds in my life. But I'm trying to go for this almost like David Wisey sort of square wave lead in a cave sort of thing. What I'm doing is I'm building in the reverb to the sound. So unlike the other ones that I had pretty dry and then I added some of the vibe to it, with this, I think it's very important that I actually hear the sound with the reverb so that as I'm playing, I'm sort of playing to the dynamics of how that's going to open the sound up, as opposed to, recording a more dry, inherently type sound, like more of a guitar or bass or lead sound. So I think that's kind of the thing I want to kind of focus on. So I'm going to loop this sort of last section here and just see what I can do. So let's go ahead and record some of that, see if I can get something in. I got this idea of doing like... maybe crazy resonance too. I kind of like it without the resonance, but there is, I mean, it's a fucking MS-20, right? Let's go ahead and do it. So this idea of just this little patch over the top. Using a lot of portamento. With the peak, it's really crazy. maybe I'll do it without the peak, because I think the peak gives it too much, like, kind of that. We already have like the cat screaming sound, so just having like a nice clean filter sweep bass sound is kind of nice. So I think that's what I'm going to go for here. Also, what was it? Verona Tragedy. How's it going? How does the vintage compare to the reissue? I think the reissue is very, very, very good. Korg puts out good reissues of things as opposed to some other companies. And I think that overall, this thing's great. But earlier in the stream, I'm fucking dealing with like these corroded contacts. So I need to go through and hit it all with contact cleaner and clean them out. I guess eventually I'll have to do that with a Korg MS-20 Mini, but like it's just nice when things plug and play and you don't have to deal with this sort of stuff. DJ Kawhi Edelina Lenka, welcome to the stream. I'm not sure who the keyboardist, musician, YouTube person is. I'm Vulture Culture. I'm a guy who likes synths. I guess it's the best way to describe it. I make music. We're here to make some dark wavy type stuff. And I've been doing that this live stream. So hopefully that is helpful to you. I really appreciate it, Verona. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody who watches this channel, because without this incredible community, my life would be so much shittier. Like, I really have a great life thanks to you guys. This has given me such meaning and purpose, and I love doing what we do, and I've been enjoying these genre-based streams. Recently, I love going through and just being very clinical with synthesizers, but it's also great when we get to actually make some music, and so it's been kind of fun. So Verona says, I'm more of a rock industrial guy. I gotta be honest, I don't even know what Darkwave was. I looked up and wow, now I know about so many awesome bands and sounds. Yeah, I mean, for me, the interesting thing is like when you listen to a band like Nights or Ebb versus Sisters of Mercy, because Sisters used the same types of drum machines and things, that same sort of sound, really isn't that, there's not that much of a difference there, to me anyways. So anyways, jumping into the DAW, I've done a lot of takes, and this last one was good. So I'm going to select that one, and you'll notice that I held this like high note, so I can just drag that out and make sure it gets there. And then I think I'm going to just drag these back so it just kind of ends on that high note. And we'll see how this sounds as a riff. I want more coils now. It's crazy. It's feeding back like a tape delay. And one of the things when I talked to Asaf, the CEO of Polyverse, we were talking about like what makes Filterverse different, and he actually said the best way to know like what makes a great filter is, can you use and abuse something and does it still sound good? And I think that was such a great example where you almost need vintage hardware gear, or at least analog gear, to get that sort of feedback and not have it sound really trashy and digital. But in this case, I'll do it again just for the fuck of it. And you can always hit the stop button on the resonance on any of these too, so that's a really great feature. But isn't that just a musical, really great resonance that really does remind me of my Roland RE501? And so yeah, I really love coils. It's a different kind of reverb sound, but I've been really into it. I'm not familiar with the Farsex. Definitely have to check out Perturbator Technoir, obviously a reference to the Terminator, right? That was the name of the club in that. Yeah, I tend to keep my voice a little bit lower, so I'll turn my voice up just a little bit for you. I don't like it when my voice is too loud, and when I'm doing these types of streams, it's actually very difficult to set that ratio right. And a lot of times if I'm like further back in the room, I can't change it once I've gotten going, so I usually stay to the side of keeping my voice a little quiet versus the other way around. But yeah, it sounds almost like a spring reverb, but kind of its own thing too. Super neat. So yeah, very excited about this. Let's make this a little bit more interesting. Let's go to bread and butter, add some resonance. We're going to use a low pass filter. Go to random and then quantize. Oh, maybe not random. What is it? I want to use sequencer, and we could do kind of like a crazy pattern or something. Let's see. What's one that's got a lot of stuff in it? This is like a kind of like a sample and holdy sounding pattern. So let's try that out. I thought about it. I don't think it necessarily needs it. I think this sounds really good. So let's go ahead, and now that we kind of have our little riff going, let's go ahead and just give the whole thing a shot. Let me get rid of that. We've got a bunch of things. We've recorded, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 synth layers, and we have a pretty good basis for a track. I use Stantastic 103 TKSs, I think. 103 TKSs, I think that's the model number, but it's basically the 3-tier Stantastic thing, and then I get a kit to add one more layer on, so I can get 4 synthesizers per stand, and that works pretty good for me. Definitely check out, I think it's called Black Panther Modular. I haven't really checked those out, but my friend Jim Daniker, who helped me with deciding what stands to use, he now recommends those over the Stantastics, which is pretty cool. stop item in there. Mr. Arcade Orchestra, that's correct. And then no racks. Yeah, I've got no rack synthesizers currently, which might be a little crazy, but. Oh, maybe I do need a. Really kind of a fun little, just a fun little bop, you know, little vintage dark wavy jam. I'm quite happy about it. I think this synthesizer sounds great. Yeah, I just think it sounds great. I think it's an awesome little synthesizer. A lot of fun. Got to clean it. But aside from that, I think I've shown that this little buddy can be really monstrous. And I think that's what you sort of are looking for when it comes to Darkwave. There's this interesting sort of dichotomy where Darkwave is both really kind of cold and warm at the same time. You know, like a lot of the sounds are kind of tinny and harsh and cold, but it does have that sort of vinyl warmth to it. And I think that being able to have a synthesizer like this, and again, I think the Korg reissue is really awesome, and I think the Korg VST is really awesome. And you could do these types of sounds with any of them. But having the ability to, you know, get that really fat analog tone, that's really good. What an incredibly stupid sentence just came out of my mouth, but I hope it gets the point across, which is, you know, this is good to have on hand, something like this, because it will take you in a certain direction of fatness when it comes to like the bass lines and stuff, and then it can get really talky with the dual filters. That's like a big part of it, is the filter resonance, and we could get into the argument of if the software versions and VST's Arturia sounds as good. When am I going to get an ARP 2600? I mean, they're like 10 to 15 grand to get a vintage one, and I'm kind of all in on the vintage thing. I'm in on vintage not because I need, like, I don't think the vintage one's going to sound better necessarily. That's not the reason I'm in on vintage. It's because I like having the limitation of using these ancient machines and sort of having to work around some of their eccentricities, because coming from the background of being a professional DJ and a mastering engineer and just working in the box all the time, I appreciate when I have to come at something from a different angle to get around a certain problem. And in this case, you know, this synth kind of fought me this stream, but that's part of the fun. Yeah, the reissue is less than 2K, and I think the reissue is a really great choice for many people. Anthony Marianelli did a great video comparing his Arptonus to the new version, the Arp M, or a version of the 2600 or whatever it is. And I thought it sounded great. But I just like these ancient machines. And also, there are so many incredible vintage synthesizers that you can get for less than $2K. I think about 40 of them I covered in my best vintage synths of 2024. 40 different synthesizers that I think are incredible buys for less than $2,000. So, you know, there is this element of it where it's like, if you're only interested in the sound, a lot of the times the modern stuff is there. There are times where I feel like the vintage stuff gives you a little bit of an edge. It has a little bit of crust, dirt, you know, wonky sort of a thing. But yeah, listening to some old school horror music. What would be an example of that? Do you mean like, because I love vintage horror films, but I don't know if you mean like orchestral or if you're talking more like the band Goblins soundtrack for Suspiria. Is that how you say that movie's name? Suspiria? Yeah, wouldn't go vintage on an ARP myself. Yeah, I think for me, it's likely never going to happen because for $10,000, there's many other cool vintage instruments you could get. And I like polysynths too. So DeCarmick says, Jim had talked about having a Prophet 5 on stage on Arcade Orchard. Would it be a big risk? He's talking about his modern, he has a modern Prophet 5 Rev 4, not a vintage one. And yeah, it is a risk. He also has a incredible sample library. And honestly, I take a lot of my cues from Jim because he sells, main stage sample packs of his synths. And yeah, I think that he could always drop back to his samples if he needed to in the middle of a show or something like that. He's kind of an interesting thing. Verona asks, as a mastering engineer, what studio monitors do you feel are the best? Are the ATC range the best mid-range? I suspect Genelix are maybe not the best, but like probably a very good standard to use. I have KRK VXT8s and a KRK subwoofer. That's not the Rocket version because those don't sound, I don't want to say they sound bad. They're probably not good for mastering. That's what I would say about them. So yeah, the Fulci soundtracks, I'll have to check that out. There's definitely Demons soundtrack. That's an interesting one. I haven't heard of Demons. Goblin was performing Suspiria live. That would be awesome. I actually have a vintage Goblin shirt. When I bought an ARP Odyssey from a guy, super cool guy, super weird man. First thing I saw when I walked into his house, he had like David Bowie, like a life-size cardboard cutout of David Bowie on an angle hanging from the ceiling, looming over you. And then I go in, I see the ARP 26 or ARP Odyssey, and it was a little. He was very experimental with the music he played, so I couldn't catch that one of the VCOs wasn't working that well. And but while I was there, he showed me his correspondences with Dennis Ratter, aka BTK. So he was writing letters back and forth with this guy. That was like one of his things. Super cool guy, total freak show, a little bit of a mess. He's sort of like crushed like 7 Modellos while I was talking to him. And but when I took the synth home, really dug into it and saw that it had some issues, I brought it back to him and he was like, okay, I didn't realize I always use it with a sequencer. I'm sorry about that. And he gave me the Goblin t-shirt as a way to say I'm sorry, which he didn't even have to do. It was super cool of him to take it back. Anyways, watch The Keep, definitely. Tangerine Dream, I love it because I've just been watching Babylon 5 and Chris Franke did that and it's just incredible. Yeah, I think the sequential stuff is very good. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with the Rockets, but mastering, you want really like flat speakers so that whatever changes you make will be very transparent on everybody's sound system. So you could probably get good results. I don't know that the Rockets are bad, but I don't know. Ryuichi Sakamoto, and David Bowie was in it. I don't know that one either. Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. Wow. I appreciate it, Monty. As always, if you guys can, one of the best ways you could support the channel is actually just sharing my videos with friends and getting more people to watch. So anyways, I think that's a pretty good place to call it for tonight. Yeah. DeKarmic, again, I'm not necessarily super up on either of those because I don't have either. You know, I'm sort of all in on the vintage stuff. I can give my opinions on the modern synths because I can interpret what it means when I look at their specs and be like, oh, well, this synth only has 8 voices, or this synth has DCOs instead of VCOs, that sort of thing. But when it comes to like MPE, I don't own, I've played some MPE stuff, but I don't really know how to rate that stuff. So I don't want to talk out of my ass ever on this channel. I mean, isn't that what the whole channel is? But you know what I mean? Like even more out of my ass than normal. Like just pure shit. I do have a Tascam MIDI Studio 688 cassette recorder, which is like the Mac Daddy cassette recorder, but I haven't used it yet. So yes. Thank you very much, Hypothesis. I hope you guys have been enjoying these genre-based streams. I think I'm going to do another next week, and then we'll jump back in on checking out some actual synths and hardware. Dorian, I really appreciate you. Thank you very much. I hope I get to see you around more often, Monty. You're definitely part of our family now, so welcome to the Vulture Culture. Yes, OST to Mandy. Tom, have a great night. Lauren, have a great night. Let's see, who else do we have? Is that Lauren Self, the Lauren Self I know from around here, or is it a different Lauren? I feel like I know you. Have a great night either way. I'm glad you learned some stuff, Sam. That's always what I'm trying to do, is trying to encourage people to make music, and I've been enjoying making more music on stream because I think that's more inspiring sometimes than just filter sweeps, you know. Don't get me wrong, I love me a good filter sweep, and it's kind of like I just got back from a vacation today, and you know you hit that perfect amount of vacation when you're on that last day, you're like, I'm ready to go home. I'm ready. Like I've been out in the streets long enough. I'm ready to get back into my comfy little bed and my comfy little life. So it's like the perfect amount. And that's how I feel about these genre streams, where it's been fun to sort of break up the format, but I'm ready to dig in on either a hardware synth or maybe a vintage drum machine. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. Zoo Wave, cats, whales, peacocks, and vultures. I honestly love that idea. Hypothesis. I think that would be great. Awesome, Lauren. I appreciate you watching. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Surge soft synth. Yeah, that's another one. It's free at the moment. That's cool. Revenge of the Ninja. So anyways, guys, I hope you guys have an excellent week. Continue to be excellent, and I will see you in the next video.